Hello, this is Dr. Hyatt, and welcome to Motivation and Leadership. Before we actually begin, I'd like to explain where this course came from and why we're using this book, which kind of are interrelated. When I came to Catawba College in 1987, I was asked by the dean to put together a course based on workshops I had been doing at my previous college, which was in Nebraska. I'd done a lot of workshops for businesses and organizations. Most of those had been on the topics of motivation and leadership, so that's why I called the course Motivation and Leadership. The problem I had was that I did not want to use a regular academic textbook because I use these in a workshop format, but rather I wanted to find a better book, and I tried different books and had not very good success. About the same time, I was also made director of the Philip Morris Center of Organizational Renewal. Philip Morris gave us $20,000 each year to put on workshops, most of which were free for the public. I received $5,000 to be the director of this effort, which left me $15,000 to put on programs. I would pay a presenter usually $500 for a half-day workshop, which was pretty good, I thought. I was also teaching computer classes at the time, and the big word processor before everybody switched to Word was a program called WordPerfect, and they were coming out with a new release for WordPerfect, and I wanted to get a jump on learning it, so Catawba sent me to the WordPerfect headquarters for a workshop for a few days to learn WordPerfect 5.1. This was located in Orem, Utah. And so I had some time off when I was there, and I started thinking about my job as the director of the Philip Morris Center and wondering if I could get a speaker for upcoming programs, and I remembered Stephen R. Covey. About 25 years earlier, as a young man, I'd heard Covey speak. I was really impressed with him as a speaker. I could still remember some of the things he said 25 years later. I mean, he was great. And so I found out, I knew that he had lived in this area near Orem, Utah, and Provo, which is adjacent to it, and he had an office in Provo. So I went to that office to see if I could speak to him. Well, he wasn't there, but one of his associates named Roger Merrill was there. I had met Roger Merrill when I was in the Air Force in California a few years earlier. So I started talking with him and asked him if Covey would be willing to come and do a workshop at Catawba College. And he said, sure. And I said, well, what would his price be? And he said, oh, his current rate is $20,000 for a half-day workshop. And I thought, you got to be kidding me. That's my whole budget. I said, well, we can't afford that. He said, well, instead, why don't you go buy his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It had just been released in 1989. He says you can use that book to put together a really neat workshop. And so I was directed by him to the university bookstore at Brigham Young University. I paid, I think, $24.95 and bought the book. This is a picture of the cover of it, of the book. Maybe yours looks like this. I think there's over 25 million copies sold now. I took the book back and I started reading it, and I thought it was interesting, but I wasn't sure it would work. When I got back from the WordPerfect workshop and back at Catawba, I started thinking about the course and what book I would use. So I picked this book up again and I started looking at it. And after I read it and started thinking about it, I decided it was exactly the book I needed for this course. Because what I want to accomplish in this course is to teach you how to better motivate other people and how to improve yourself so that you can be a highly effective person and a highly effective leader. So I've used some of his other books. He wrote one called Principle Centered Leadership, but I didn't like it as good as this one. I've tried using this in conjunction with academic books, and finally I just threw it all out, and I've been using this book ever since. The good thing is it doesn't cost very much, so I'm hoping that you'll keep the book and refer to it a lot later on. So let's get you excited by showing you a little introductory video. So there he is, Stephen R. Covey. Well, it doesn't exactly look like that, but I thought that would be a flashy way to begin the course. Okay, so let's talk about the 7 Habits program and exactly what it is. I'm saying, and agreeing with Covey, that this is a life-changing program. Now, I don't think I'm going to change your life within the time limit of this course. That's why I'm hoping you'll keep the book and refer to it over and over again. That's why I like to teach this course, because it reminds me to use these 7 habits in my own life, and it can have a big impact on your life. So how can it become a life-changing course? Well, first, you need to learn, teach, and do, Covey says. You will be learning the principles from this book by viewing these videos, reading the book, studying for exams. And I'm asking you to teach them. Now, how do you teach them? Well, I'm not asking you to do a presentation, but I want you to share some of the principles and ideas you learn with your roommate, your spouse, a sibling, a friend, a coworker. And this will help you to better understand it. It also helps you to make a public commitment to the principles that you talk about, and therefore you're more likely to do these things and put them into place in your life. So let's introduce to you some terms. First, a paradigm. What's a paradigm? Big fancy college word. It's our view of the world. Think of it like a pair of glasses. I remember when I was a young man and I had very bad vision. I went to the optometrist and he put a pair of glasses on me after checking my vision, told me to look out the window, and the world looked different than I thought it looked. It was really different. My view of the world was different. So it's not an event that happens to you, but the interpretation of the event that's important. Let's say that you see someone running out of a building, jumping in their car, and squealing their wheels and burning rubber as they pull out fast and take off. Now, how would you interpret that event? It depends on your paradigm. You might say, he just robbed somebody. You might say, somebody's chasing him. You might think he's got an emergency at home and he's got to go take care of it, or he's late to work, or he's late to an appointment. Who knows? So it's your interpretation of the event that makes a difference as to how you view that situation. That's your paradigm. Now, we have different paradigms in life. Here's one of my favorite ones. An English professor wrote these words on the board. A woman without her man is nothing, and directed the students to punctuate it correctly. What's interesting is that the men and the women who had different paradigms punctuated it differently. The men punctuated it so that it reads like this: a woman without her man is nothing, using commas. The women, using a colon, punctuated it differently. A woman without her man is nothing. Same words, different meaning, different paradigms. Another term we need to understand is that of a habit. Covey says that a habit is an intersection of our knowledge, skill, and desire. So I'm going to use often in this course my family as an example. I hope you viewed my introductory video, and if you did, you know that we had 7 children. And we wanted them to clean up their room. We wanted that to be a habit with them. So first they had to have the knowledge. They usually had the knowledge. They knew what to do and why to do it. They knew to clean up the toys and their clothes all over the floor, and they knew how to put it away, and they knew how to run the vacuum cleaner. They had the skills to do it. They knew it's not doesn't take much skill to run a vacuum cleaner or to pick clothes up off the floor. What they often did not have was the desire. If you have the desire or the wanting to do it, then it becomes a habit. Some of my children, it became a habit to keep their rooms clean. Others, they did not. So that's what a habit is, okay? Effective habits are internalized principles and patterns of behavior. They become so much a part of you that you don't even think of it, that that's just the way you behave. Think of when you started driving a car for the first time and you had to concentrate and consciously turn on that left turn signal to make a left turn. Now you probably don't even think about it. You just come to where you want to turn left, you turn on that left signal, and you go. It's an internalized way of behaving. That's what we mean by effective habits. Now, what do we mean by effectiveness? Covey defines it in what he calls the P-PC balance. P stands for production. PC is production capability. If you want to get the production out of any relationship or any piece of machinery, you have to take care of the production capability. For example, you may have heard of Aesop's fable. Aesop's fable, the goose that laid the golden eggs. So there's this dirt poor farmer that's walking, well, I guess, along his farm, and he looks in the bush and he sees a goose. He picks up the goose and sees underneath it a golden egg. He thinks probably this is somebody playing a joke on him, but he goes and gets it tested and finds it's real gold. So he keeps the goose and he keeps the gold. The next morning the goose lays another golden egg, so he takes care of the goose. And the next day and the next day, and he becomes fabulously wealthy. But like a lot of wealthy people, he also becomes very greedy, and he doesn't want to have to wait until the next day to get the next egg. So he thought, I'll just cut off the goose's neck, reach inside and get all the rest of the eggs out. So he cuts the neck off the goose, reaches inside and finds nothing, because he killed the goose that laid the golden eggs. So the health and the welfare of the goose is your production capability. The eggs, the golden eggs, are your production. One of my favorite stories regarding this is the story of my lawnmower when I was living in Nebraska. I should have kept my lawnmower in the garage, and that's where it belonged, but often when I was mowing the lawn, I'd end up in the back of my yard under a big apple tree that was nice and shady, and I would just leave my lawnmower there until the next time and then go get it and mow the lawn. Well, I did that all summer long, and then finally got to be October, and an early winter came, an early snowstorm. Leaves had fallen over my lawnmower, and now had snow all over it, and I forgot it was even there. When the next spring came, it was time to mow the lawn. I looked in the garage, and my lawnmower wasn't there. Then I remembered the apple tree. So I went to the apple tree, and sure enough, there was my lawnmower. Well, I pulled it out and made sure it had gas in it and pulled the rope. I think the rope broke. Couldn't start it. Even if I tied the rope and tried again, the spark plug was bad. I had not taken care of that lawnmower, left it out in the weather, and it had ruined the lawnmower. So that's my production capability. I want to produce. I wanted to mow the lawn. It's like driving a car. You have to change the oil to keep driving the car. If you don't, eventually the oil's all gone and you'll blow the engine. So you take care of that car. This also applies to human relationships. If you want to have a good relationship with a friend or a spouse or whoever it may be, you have to build a good relationship, take care of that relationship in order to get the friendship or whatever it is you want out of that relationship. So let's talk a little bit about Stephen Covey. This is a picture of him. Yes, he was bald. He was an authority on leadership and effectiveness with his international bestseller, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and also the other book I mentioned, Principle-Centered Leadership. Covey was also co-chairman of the Franklin Covey Company. He started out with Covey and Associates, merged with the Franklin Day Planners to form Franklin Covey Company, the largest entity in the corporate training industry. He held an MBA from Harvard and a doctorate from Brigham Young University. Among acknowledgments, Covey's been recognized as one of Time Magazine's top 25 most influential Americans and one of Sales and Marketing Management's top 25 power brokers. I can remember when he would come to Charlotte, they would fill up a ballroom at a hotel, 500 people, everybody paying $50 or $100 just to listen to him speak. Covey made a career of educating individuals and organizations about the powers of self-knowledge and control as a means of achieving personal and professional effectiveness. In April of 2012, Covey, an avid cyclist, was riding a bike in Rock Canyon Park in Provo, Utah, where he lived, when he lost control of his bike and fell. He was wearing a helmet, but according to his daughter, Catherine Sagers, the helmet slipped and his head hit the pavement. Catherine said Covey went down a hill too fast and flipped forward on his bike. It was a pretty big goose egg on the top of his head. He also suffered cracked ribs and a partially collapsed lung, but they thought he was okay. So he went on about his business, and I think it was later in May of that year, he was visiting family in Idaho Falls, Idaho, was complaining of a headache and started feeling really bad, and they took him to the hospital, and he died from complications. It wasn't May, it was July. Complications resulting from that bike accident. They found that he'd had bleeding on the brains very slowly since that bicycle accident, and he died at age 79, so he's no longer with us. Before he died, I did meet him. I think it was about 2007. He was at an event, and he was did a short program. He was there to view a pageant, which I was also viewing, and I saw him in the cafeteria, and I went up and I talked to him, and I told him about this course I was teaching based on his book. I was a little worried he might think I was violating copyright, but nah, he thought it was great, wanted to know what I did in the course, and said keep it up. A really nice guy. So I think it was in 1976, when he was working on his master's thesis at Harvard, he decided to study what made people successful in life. So he discovered that there were as he reviewed the success literature, there were two different approaches. One he called the personality ethic, and the other the character ethic. The personality ethic says that success is a function of personality, public image, attitudes, behaviors, skills, and techniques that lubricate the process of human interaction. And for the last 50 years, at that time, that was what people had subscribed to. That's the way you be successful in life. Money, clothes makes the man. You've got to look presidential, and so forth and so forth. So the personality ethic says that you can be successful through human relations techniques. Dale Carnegie wrote a book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Have a positive mental attitude. Okay? I remember going to buy a car one time, a new car, and the salesman came and put his hand on my shoulder and said, I'm going to take care of you. The problem is I didn't really buy it. It was hollow because he was using only these techniques, but what he didn't have was character. Character ethic are the basic principles of effective living, and people can only experience true success and enduring happiness as they learn and integrate these principles under the basic character. People like Benjamin Franklin subscribed to character ethic. He tried to work on different character traits, a different one every week. So the first 150 years of our nation, we subscribed to the character ethic. The character ethic says that our motives for what we do should be based on values, and that character gives life to the techniques. He's not saying don't learn how to interact with people, not have a positive mental attitude. He's not saying you shouldn't learn to be a good communicator. But if you have character, then those things will work much, much better. In fact, when I didn't buy that car from that salesman, I went to another dealership where the salesman seemed to really have character. He took an interest in me and my budget and what I needed. I ended up buying a car from the guy. And when it came time to trade it in and get another car, I went back to the same salesman because I trusted him. He had character. So character should come before personality. It's what we call primary success traits. Some people may say, aren't you just saying that basic goodness leads to success? Maybe. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, what you are shouts so loudly in my ears, I cannot hear what you say. So we might look at it like this. Personality is what other people see. It's if this were an iceberg, it was what you would see above the ice. It looks like a big mountain of ice. But below, even more importantly, as a foundation, is the character. And that's much more important. Let's hear Covey talk about this.
The development of the 7 Habits began with a study I completed in 1976. I wanted to study the success idea in America and how it evolved. So I got into the popular success literature going back for 200 years. This included many, many books, magazine articles, annotated bibliographies, summaries, reviews. I literally tapped into thousands and thousands of sources, either directly or indirectly. As I worked, I started to sense a pattern. As soon as I sensed this pattern, I looked for evidence of it, and the evidence was everywhere. The basic finding was this. For the first 150 years, almost the entire focus of the literature was on character, on principles, on what we might call the character ethic. Attributes such as integrity, fidelity, courage, compassion, contribution, responsibility, justice. These findings became the basis for writing the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And then, because of many, many societal forces, the emphasis gradually shifted in the early 1900s, particularly in the 20s and the 30s, away from the character ethic to what we might call the personality ethic, which focused more on techniques than on principles. You are probably familiar with many books that illustrate the literature of the personality ethic. They basically deal with how to take care of yourself, how to look good, how to dress in particular ways, how to create the right image. In other words, the personality ethic focuses on how to appear to be rather than on how to actually be. Many of these techniques have real merit. However, if they don't have their roots in the character ethic, if they don't have their roots in principles, they won't have the power to create enduring effectiveness. For example, what if people learn techniques of influencing others, but they're fundamentally duplicitous or deceitful in their character? What if they really wanted to use people to build their own economic success? They might develop smoothness in their relationships so that they can have their own personal ends achieved, money, fame, glory, whatever. They really couldn't care less about contribution or service, purpose, adding value, helping others. How much trust would you have in them? How willing would you be to follow them or to rely upon them when things get tough? You know, one time I had a student come to me and say, "How am I doing in your class?" I looked him in the eye and said, "You really know how you're doing, don't you? A lot better than I do. How are you doing?" And he kind of looked down squeamishly. "Well, not too good, I guess. I just had kind of a rough time lately, and maybe I haven't applied myself as much as I should have." You really came to find out how well you'd psyched me out, how well you'd psyched out the system, isn't that right? When in fact, you kind of know in your heart how you're doing. "Well, how am I doing?" he said. "How are you doing?" Let's focus on what's really happening, not on what's appearing to happen. You see, this whole personality ethic with its technique focus is like the tip of an iceberg. The tip, or that part which is seen on the surface by others, it's above the water. The character ethic is like the great mass of the iceberg under the water. People often do no work in the foundation, where the great mass is, where the greatest long-term impact is. Too many people give all their energy and focus to the tip of the iceberg, that is, to learning techniques that others can see. You see this even in organizations, not just individuals. You see, programs change, practices change, principles do not change. If we help individuals and organizations to internalize principles, they will know how to adapt the practices to address specific situations. Let me emphasize that techniques have their place. They're very important. I really mean that. I mean, you want good human relations techniques, public relations techniques, communication techniques, management techniques. But when we use techniques to cover our own lack of character, they become manipulative. They undermine trust and confidence. You see, what we really need is the character ethic. And that's essentially what the 7 Habits is about. This material is based on an inside-out approach, meaning we give our first energies to our own character development. before we focus on techniques or how to be more effective with others. Gandhi beautifully demonstrated this principle once. A mother came to him and said, "Would you help my child reduce the amount of sugar he is eating?" Gandhi paused, thought, and answered, "Well, talk to me in a week." A week later, the mother asked him again, and he talked to the boy, and the boy agreed. And the mother said, "Why didn't you talk with him last week?" Gandhi smiled and said, "You don't understand. Last week, I too was eating sugar." Unless we work on our character, we will not develop trustworthiness. And trustworthiness is built by the combination of both character and competency. We could have all of the ability in the world, but if we don't have the basic character to be reliable, to take responsibility, others will soon learn to distrust us. They're fearing that we are just trying to meet our own ends, perhaps at their expense. In my opinion, unless we return to the character ethic, we won't have the basic foundation of trustworthiness. That's what leads to trust, which is needed to build effective interpersonal relationships. In the final analysis, what we are communicates far more eloquently than anything we say or do. I love the quote of Henry David Thoreau: "For every 1,000 hacking at the leaves of evil, there is one striking at the root." In other words, let's work primarily on the roots to begin with and build a foundation of trustworthiness. This is one of the key areas of focus in the 7 Habits, to build character and competence, and to restore trustworthiness and trust in our lives, in the lives of our families, our organizations. Trust and trustworthiness really are the basis of personal and interpersonal leadership. It's the foundation of all true effectiveness.
Okay, that is the end of this first video. I'm trying to make the videos somewhere around 30 minutes or less. And so we'll stop at this point and pick this up with the next video, which you can view at your leisure.